Okay.
I'm going to leave you now.
All right. I'll get accompanied by the first guest, who's got so many different names under his disguise that I'm only able to name some of them. Quiet Village is obviously one of his projects. Cabin Fever, Matthew E. is one of his names. Rekids, Radio Slave, probably the most well-known, but we just call him Matt Edwards. So give it up for him. So Matt, you just came back from Ibiza, basically straight from the airport here to CDR.
Straight here, yeah, literally.
I think that deserves another applause.
Thank you.
Did you ever feel the need to see a psychiatrist because of all your different pseudonyms, all your different names, all your different personas?
Not about that, but maybe other things. But for sure, maybe.
Why do you have so many different names? Why not just one?
I guess when you're making music, it's kind of like maybe it's like being an actor. I don't know, you put on a different hat, or you become a different persona when you want to make different music. So, and you know, things like press and the media and the way they perceive you, it always helps sometimes when you're making, say, hip-hop to have a different name to when you're making techno. Because you know otherwise people get confused. You
feel like you owe it to the people so they can pigeonhole you and your music?
It's not about pigeonholing, but maybe it's about creating the right vibe and the whole thing, and that goes for the artwork, everything that you want to create or want to achieve with that project. You know, I mean, I'm really into the visual side, and I think that's really important to have different ideas for each moniker that you are. So,
is there one that you identify with the most?
Not really. I mean, they're all special. I mean, things like the Machine Project, for sure. Working with Misha, that was amazing. You know, I got to work with one of the guys, one of my favourite artists. So that was really good.
Matthew E, was that one of your first projects? Ministry of Sound. You were a resident there.
The first. I mean, obviously, primarily I was a DJ. I grew up in South London. I had my first break playing at the Milk Bar. Then went on to be a resident at Ministry of Sound for Open All Hours, which was the night Jim Masters did, which was a techno night when techno was pretty unpopular, I guess, in London.
What time are we talking?
This is like 95 to 98. And then I moved to Brighton and, around 2000 started the Radio Slave thing.
And is that basically what made us not being able to get Kylie Minogue out of our heads?
Yeah, I mean, basically I was really frustrated with a lot of pop remixes, and there was a lot of great pop records out at the time. There was the things like Neptunes were making great records, like Britney Spears, and I just felt that I couldn't play these records in the clubs, so I started doing re-edits and remixes, and I was lucky enough to do the Can't Get You Out of My Head remix, which Pete Tong played, was then signed, and that kind of was the birth of Radio Slave.
But you did a lot of other edits of Limp Bizkit, of so many artists, Busta Rhymes and mainstream acts. What was your approach to do a Radio Slave edit?
I guess it was just trying to find this sort of dance floor sort of angle where I could play these pop records in a club. And at the time, it was the early 2000s. There was this whole mashup thing going on. You know, electro clash was, I guess, born. People like DJ Hell, a lot of people were suddenly playing pop records again in clubs, and so it was a great way to find these maybe undiscovered or almost populist records, and then find ways of playing them in a club context.
Was there a certain irony to it? I mean, the whole name Radio Slave sounds like you sort of making fun of it.
People always ask me. Basically, it was a name that had to come up with a name pretty quickly, and basically it's a slave to the radio or radio music, so pop music. That's where it comes from.
So those were the tracks that you actually became famous with. Did
Yeah.
you? I mean, you probably started playing really big clubs due to those edits. Did you ever feel forced to keep going with doing those re-edits of very popular songs?
Well, I mean, back then actually there wasn't the need to DJ so much because I was getting actually paid a lot of money to do remixes. Back then, major labels actually had budgets and they could they paid a lot of money. That's why a lot of producers, who you see now DJing all the time, back then they weren't jobbing DJs. They were in the studio 7 days a week, and they were making enough to be able to stay at home and not DJs.
And when was the turning point where you said, I can't deal with this anymore, I want to do my own tracks, and which are not based on well-known tracks?
I guess around, say, 2000, maybe it was 2003, I started doing the record material, which was then released on Soul Jazz. And I also was working at that time with Joel Martin, and Joel and I went on to do the Quiet Village project. So I guess from doing so many remixes, it was a really good learning curve in deconstruction of music. You get all the parts, you get to see how people make a record, and in that way, you have access to some amazing music, which you can then sample and use, and also put together. It teaches you how records are made.
So would you recommend that to other producers out there who say it's a really cool way to get famous, or?
It's not I wouldn't say it's a cool way to get famous, but I think in that respect, it's just a really good way to analyse or to get into music. I mean, I love all kinds of music, and I really, in fact, hate pop music these days. But back then, I was actually really into it. I was buying a lot of pop music, So I think times have totally changed, and I think a lot of music these days is so throwaway. And of course, anyone, this is the thing. Majors don't need to pay a remixer because everyone does their own version, like with Daft Punk and Get Lucky. They don't need to pay remixes. What's the point?
So you talked about this other project from you, which I'm not sure if so many are familiar with, but it was, at least for me, very, very special, called Rekids, which was also then the foundation for your label, or was it the other way around?
Not really. I mean, the artist name Rekid was born first, and then a few years after that, that's when James Master, decided to do the Rekids label. So it kind of just made sense to use the same name but add an S.
How would you describe the sound?
At the time, it was described in the media as being like crack house. I think it was like slow house music. So
and how would you describe it?
I don't know. I mean, it was my kind of take on this Detroit beatdown sound. I was influenced by Jay Dilla, and just pitching down house music to a very slow speed. And then also taking influences from, say, New Age stuff like Klaus Schulze, which is also very four to the floor, but very slow.
Anyone, I can just highly recommend it. It's called Made in Menorca. It was released on Soul Jack Records, so really dig that up. We're talking about another project called Quiet Village. I remember back then, the first two 12-inches were released on a label called Whatever We Want Records from New York City. And you only sold them in Hideout, which is kind of a high-end streetwear store in London. And what was your strategy behind that?
I mean, it wasn't our label. It was a label from New York called Whatever We Want, which was started by a guy called Carlos. It was also where DJ Harvey kind of re-established himself with Thomas Bullock with the Map of Africa project. And Carlos was a very difficult person. He only wanted to sell the records through Hideout, which is a store run by a guy that runs Stussy in the UK, Michael Kopman, and it was his way of high-end music, and the music was very good, but it was again, for people like you had to go out there and struggle.
Paid ridiculous amounts of money for a 12-inch, but it was also about the music, not only.
Yeah, but it was again, it was this very much this New York thing, which I think New York has really managed to do. Maybe things that people, the labels like Lies, or they just have this ability to create this, this vibe where people really need it. You have to have these records.
That concept must have worked out because you are selling the 12 inches on your label through a very elitist fashion store in London now as well.
Yeah, I mean,
Pyramids of Mars.
Yeah, we do. I mean, we do the same. I mean, it's a really good way of breaking a band. We're doing it with LNCC, this fashion store in the UK, and with a guy called Rouge Mécanique. It's just a really good way of promoting a young artist. We're actually losing money on every 12 we sell. I mean, the leather sleeve is £15, but I think it costs us like £25 to make.
You think you have to deal with collectible items like this in order to make something special? It's not about releasing just a 12-inch anymore?
I don't know. I mean, everyone these days is doing their records in white paper sleeves, and I think if the music is special, then it's worth investing the money in it. And it's for us as a label, we're constantly trying to find new ways of expanding, finding new fan base. And these days, it's really difficult. Everyone wants everything for free. So by creating a product which is very special, like a leather sleeve, is something that people will then maybe want, and then they'll tell their friends. And then when it comes to us releasing the album, then we've kind of done the job. You know, it works out well.
You brought the Quiet Village project on CD, so this was actually one of those 12 inches that we were talking about earlier on that was only sold at Hideout and quickly reached ridiculous prices on eBay. And you released an album on K7 under that disguise. Yeah. Maybe we can listen to a track from that album.
Let me have a look.
So Quiet Village was a project that you did together with Joel Martin. And what was your mindset when you were doing that?
I've known Joel since school. He was actually, we went to the same school. He was 4 years younger than me. But Joel is one of the biggest crate diggers in the UK. He's very, very well known. He went on to work for Christie's and the auction house, and now he works for Music DeWolf, Music DeWolf is one of the oldest music library companies in the world, and he's a specialist. So I was going to say, we'd always been into sampling records and trying to make tracks, but we decided I guess it was kind of like there was no one at the time that was doing anything like kind of air or, you know, I think down-tempo music or chill-out music had become like a dirty word. I think no one was really doing it, so we attempted to sort of create something.
And what was your approach? I mean, what did you think made your music different to the rest?
I guess it's just the samples. I mean, we were just really particular with what we used. We tried to find things that no one had ever sampled and create this kind of sort of exotica kind of sound. Kind of, it's been a bit overused, but this kind of tropical kind of meets exotica.
I mean, those were the early days when Balearic music was coming up. It wasn't really that widespread as it was maybe 3 years ago.
I guess we found kind of like a niche with this sound, and it kind of worked. And I mean, but the whole problem with it is it's very sample based. So
I was going to say, what did the label say?
Well, we went on after Whatever We Want. We went on to sign to Virgin. And Virgin had the idea of having everything replayed, and you know, obviously they'd worked with Massive Attack and the like, and but in the end we got dropped, and then we went on to sign to K7.
How was that? I mean, you being signed by a major label, coming from a small indie label, and then all of a sudden, was it? I mean, I don't know if you can talk about this, but was it because of the sample clearance, or?
Yeah, I mean, totally. I mean, it all comes down. I mean, we deal with it all the time with Rekids, and we always advise artists against samples, even though, as you know, we do release some sample-based music, but you know, it just does become a real nightmare with clearance, and I think this was a real issue with Virgin, and of course replaying it costs a lot of money, so we went to K7 and they agreed to do it and to clear the samples. So. And
that took about how many years?
We actually made the album in 2005, and then I think it was finally released in 2008.
So how is that as an artist? You have all the music and you want to release it, and you have to wait for 3 years for the album to be released.
yeah, I mean, it's incredibly frustrating. Working with major labels can be an absolute nightmare. It's really difficult. And once you give them the music, you know, it basically is theirs. So they can dictate to you how and what they want to do. It can be really difficult, especially if you've got plans, you want to do tours or you have ideas of doing live things. We were really lucky. After a year of being signed to Virgin, they dropped us, and then within 6 or 7 months, we were picked up by K7. So yeah, and then it was another process of contracts, etc.
I think we'll talk about the ups and downs of running a label or that are connected to labels later on as well. But the whole setup, basically the project Quiet Village has a different pseudonym as well. Maxi and Zeus.
Maxi and Zeus.
Maxi and Zeus, okay.
Yeah, I mean the Maxi and Zeus thing again, I don't know if you know the music, but we released, I think, 312s via International Phil. Yeah, I mean, at the moment we're still in a deal with K7, so unfortunately we can't use the Quiet Village names. So this is a way of releasing music and trying to do something. I mean, Joel still lives in London and he comes over, and we're both desperate to make music. So it can be incredibly frustrating when you're tied to a label. So.
And how do you do that technically? I mean, he's in London, you are here. Does he come over? Do you fly over to London? Do you work over the internet?
No, he comes here, and we hang out for a week, and yeah, I mean, we're best friends. So we sit there and fight and argue and shout at each other and do all the normal things that friends do.
What's your setup like?
At home at the moment, I'm using 2 computers. I've got a PC, an old PC, which I still use, and people probably might know that I sometimes use Fruity Loops for sounds, which I still actually use for drum. I actually like it as a step sequencer. So for drum sounds, sometimes I go back to that, and then I've got lots of outboard gear as well. So it all depends. I always think it's always about ideas. It doesn't really matter about what you've got. You can work with the cheapest of equipment, smallest of PC or whatever. I sometimes, in fact, think that the more you have, the less you actually create, because you spend all this time, trying to learn about every piece of machinery.
I think that's one of the key messages here at CDR as well, that it's all about using the equipment that you have, and it's about ideas and not equipment in the end.
Yeah,
at least
course.
That's one of those messages that we've heard here before, and I think that's very important.
Yeah.
You brought us some new music of your collaboration with Mr. Martin.
Yeah, I can play you. This is an unreleased track, which hopefully will come out very soon. That only just got started, by the way.
It goes on for another 30 minutes, so those were just the first two.
Yeah. Gives you an idea. Anyway.
What kind of influences do you have for this project? Is there a certain kind of music that you listen to before you sit down to make a Quiet Village or Maxi and Zeus track?
I guess Joel and I both have really similar interests when it comes to music. A lot of soundtracks, New Age, Klaus Schultz, things like that, Vangelis, all those kind of things. A lot of jazz, and yeah, I mean, of course, Joel's the master for that. For finding and digging and just really trying to find things. He's really, and it's a good thing. He's really conscious about the source material. No one must know about it. And of course, he knows a lot of people like Mark B and all these real crate diggers, Nick the Record, and people who know what's being used and what's not being used. So,
is it that when you get together in the studio that you have so many ideas that you don't know where to start, or is it sometimes that you also look at the screen and think,
No, I mean we kind of plan it out. I mean we talk and we send each other tracks, and we know each other pretty well. I mean, especially when we're doing remixes, we work really fast. You know, we have a really clear idea and about, you know, anything from tempo to how the tracks will work out and what we want to achieve. It's a good partnership. It works well.
Have you also had partnerships that you said, okay, after those 2 tracks, never again?
Yeah, probably. I mean, it's not the easiest of things. I mean, I really don't know how bands work because, I mean, if you've got more than 2 or 3 people in the studio, then it becomes a battle, I think. And I always think, I mean, I worked in the studio in the 90s with 2 other guys, and I took the back seat. I was the producer, I had an engineer, and I always think, you know, the music or the ideas that I had inside of me, the things I wanted to create never came out because I wasn't hands-on, and it wasn't until I sat down on my own and did it that I really felt that I could create the music I wanted to.
So would you say it's easier to work with somebody else or on your own?
Of course, it's easy to work on your own, but I mean it's not often that I work with friends, and I only work with a couple of friends, and they're both like best mates, so it works out okay.
Okay.
I think you've got to have that understanding of each other. You know, it's really. I mean, I've got no idea how a lot of dance producers have these ghost writers, and then, you know, and all that kind of stuff. I just don't know how you can get the picture or of what you want to achieve across. I don't know.
Do you see yourself as an artist or as an entertainer in the first role?
As an artist, I guess, more so than a DJ, I think. But yeah, I would love, you know, for me personally, I would love to spend more time in the studio, less time touring. But it's part of this, you know, this monster that's happening. That, you know, and it's very difficult for artists to make money.
Is DJing a necessity because records don't really make?
Yeah, I mean,
if
you look at an artist we work with, Nina Kravitz, you know, Nina has become a huge star, but I don't think people really care about the music anymore. And I think a lot of people who want to listen to her music certainly won't buy it. They'll just download it. And so in that respect, she's out there touring all the time. And I know for a fact that she would love to make more music. And she feels incredibly frustrated. And, you know, I think the same happens with Carl Craig, and I think for a lot of people. You know, I think Carl is much happier being at home than he is being on the road, you know. And
how do you create a motivation to do music then? Do you see your music then as a necessity to get bookings? No, for me, certainly not. And I would never think of it in that way. But of course, you do have to release music. But I think there's a lot of guys out there who are DJing and making good money who have almost completely stopped making music. You know, and of course, there are this new wave of producers, and there's some incredible music being made this year and being released, but you don't see those guys getting gigs. You know, there seems to be this top tier of people who are making money, and I don't think they're going to give up their money to the people underneath. Give us 3 names of artists that really inspire you at the moment. Of course, Ricardo Villalobos. I'm always inspired by him. I think, you know, there's so many people that seem to be caught up in making this kind of retro New Jersey rubbish, and this guy is always making futuristic music, and for me techno is future. You know, it's sci-fi, it's about, you know, technology, and I think he does it very well. Also, okay. And Mad Mike. I'm a big fan. Okay. So talking about your label Rekids, it's also very club oriented. You have a lot of tunes that aim strictly on the floor or at the floor, and who are not really made for home listening, I would say. No, I mean that was the whole point with Rekids at the time. This was back in 2006. I think the Germans were leading the way with labels and dance music at that point, I think, and there were very few UK independent labels. Maybe Jesse Rose's labels, also Damien Lazarus was doing a thing, but we felt there was a gap. And I, of course, by that stage, I've been touring, I had a lot of friends, and it just kind of made sense to start a label. And you were living together with Jesse Rose when you first came to Berlin? I was for a brief period, yes, yeah. And how did that work out? Did you make music together, or? No, we didn't. He subjected me to a lot of music. Okay. But when you started out, I mean, there was the big. I mean, you actually had to go through two big crises, which I guess put your label to the test.
Yeah.
First was basically the bankruptcy of your first distribution.
Mm-hmm.
How did you get your motivation back to continue?
I guess, I mean, we were really lucky when we started Rekids. We were still managing to be able to sell around 3,000 records per release, something like that. And then
that was when?
2006. And of course, later on with the Grindhouse release, I think we sold about 20,000. So there were these moments where, even though things went really wrong, we seemed to sort of come back with something else, with a strong release or.
But were there ever those moments where you said, okay, I can't take it anymore, it's so much work, and now another downfall? And,
yeah, I mean, of course, but I mean, once you've started something, once you're in it, it's very difficult to step away. And luckily, we've never had to borrow money. We've always, we've always managed to come back, and we've been incredibly lucky. So many labels are already continually keep going under, and we're still hanging in there. But it is, it's really tough. It's really tough. I mean, we're hemorrhaging money all the time with the label, but luckily we've got people like artists like Nina, Mr. G, and these guys keep delivering the goods, and it means we can continue.
And you teamed up with a friend, I guess, James, who is now dealing with the side of the label as well.
Yeah, I mean, I was really lucky. I mean, I've known James for many years. This is James Masters, and James comes from a corporate background, and this is kind of quite good advice to anyone who's setting up a label. It's really important to have someone who's looking after the money, because I'm absolutely useless, and you need someone who can do the accounts, someone who can chase the money, and he's great like that. And without him, I think we would have gone under within the first 3 years.
So you created a lot of or at least create not only your own different disguises, but also sub-labels of Rekids. One is Pyramids of Mars.
We do, yeah. We have the Pyramids of Mars label, which is the kind of like more experimental side of Rekids. Earlier this year, we released the Vince Watson album, and later this year, we'll be releasing the Rouge Mécanique album. And we have lots of other things. But it's more of kind of like an art label. We'll be hopefully doing a book, and it's just a way of maybe expanding into different areas that we couldn't do maybe with Rekids, which is more of, a populist sort of dance label, which, is more, as you said, focused on nightclubs and dance floor music.
Did you bring any of the music from Pyramids of Mars label?
I did. I mean, I can play you a track that won't be coming out till later this year, but it's a track I've done with this good friend of mine, Tom Gandy. So I can play you that if you like.
Sure. So that's a project called Matom.
Matom, yeah.
And that was recorded here in the Hansa Studios here in Berlin?
Well, no, the original concept for this project was we were asked by Red Bull Music Academy to compose an hour's worth of music for... it was like a session. I think Moritz von Oswald was involved, and my friend and I, we took like 3 days, I think, and we created 7 songs. And since then, we've gone on to play in Poland, also in a festival in Lille, and then in January, I don't know if anyone was there, but we did a showcase at the canteen for Pyramids of Mars. So yeah, it's like an ongoing thing. It's a live, pretty much live project where Tom's playing 2 keyboards. I'm actually for the first time kind of using Tractor, but just with the F1, just to trigger samples and loops. And then we're also using a Moog Voyager and some other stuff, yeah.
And you told me earlier on that you're recording each other?
Yeah, basically we sit in the studio and I record Tom, and then he records me playing around, and basically we take these sessions and kind of create tracks. But the idea is to have this very sort of, I guess, free-form, tracks with a lot of movement. I don't know how to describe it, but yeah. We wanted very much a live feel. So this is the first kind of time that, for me as a producer, that I've ever done stuff where I'm not looking at the screen all the time. So yeah, it's exciting, really good fun.
But what do you do when you have those moments? What are the things that inspire you, that get you out of those zones?
Well, I mean, I guess with Tom, I mean, Tom's a great musician. He's a multi-instrumentalist, and he recently worked on the remake of War of the Worlds, of Jeff Wayne's War of the Worlds, and he actually mixed the whole album. And he's an incredibly talented guy to work with, and we've known each other since Brighton. He's played on a lot of my remixes. He played on the DJ Hell one. He's played on the Horny remix, and I've always wanted to do a project with him because he's such a great piano player. So it's kind of like the perfect way. He's not really so much into a lot of obscure kind of dance music, so I play him a lot of stuff. We listen to a lot of music, and then we sit there and we create tracks. So.
Okay, sounds very interesting. So that's going to be out at the end of the year, you said?
Yeah, hopefully we will release it before the end of the year on Pyramids of Mars, yeah, for sure.
One other project, The Machine.
Yeah.
It's more of an audio-visual concept.
Yeah.
What's the story behind that?
The Machine project, I don't know if people know about this. This is something I started about 4 years ago, and I released an album. It was actually through Rekids / Pyramids of Mars, and it was very conceptual for me. And I think it kind of weirded a lot of people out because people were expecting me to make like a Radio Slave album, and I released this 6-track kind of. I guess it's not a mini album because all the tracks are very long, but. It takes in a lot of influences that I'm really into, such as sort of Afro and electronica, and I had this sort of concept. I guess it goes back to the record idea of a lot of the record tracks were kind of influenced again by my education and being an artist and these kind of collage works. So it was kind of like taking a bit of this and a bit of that, lots of field recordings. So really sort of kind of mixing a lot of styles. And I then went on to work with a really great artist from Australia, Misha Hollenbach, who runs the Perks and Mini label, fashion label, who's also quite an accomplished artist. And I sent him the tracks, and he said that he would produce a piece of work for each piece of music. So yeah.
Again, a special project connected to your music. So you
yeah.
always think that you have to go beyond the music to create something.
Well, this is the idea with Pyramids of Mars. Really, is to work every time we have a release, is to work with the visual artist and try and create an entire picture. For Rouge Mécanique, we're hopefully going to be working with Trevor Jackson, and I think it really fits with what he's doing, and it should work.
So we heard about all your different projects and all the different approaches, and the music is very, very different. But I guess the name you get booked by the most is Radio Slave. So
right.
Do you ever get faced by people asking you, can you play the Kylie Minogue re-edit, or can you play the pop tunes that you're known for?
Well, it's not. I mean, it's obviously people want to hear Grindhouse, but I'm not a jukebox, so I'm not a band, so I'm not going to play that, unfortunately. And
but how do you deal with those requests then?
The most famous mix isn't actually by me, so I didn't actually make it. So you have to ask Dubfire to play it.
But you see the point. I mean, that's the kind of more the mainstream approach, and all the other projects are more you as an artist and not you as the radio slave.
Of course, and I think it affects a lot of people. I mean, I know for a fact Josh Wink. Every time Josh Wink DJs, that everyone wants to hear High State of Consciousness, and God knows how many years that came out. And I guess it's one of those things, isn't it? If you have a really big record, then of course people come because they think you're going to play it, but I think that's not me really as a DJ, you know.
But you sometimes just deliver a little bit and then take it to your material.
I don't think I've played that record maybe in 2 years, So, and I probably played like another version or something like that. So, yeah. I mean, it's difficult. I mean, of course, that's what people want. And like I said at the beginning of this interview, that's why it's great to have different monikers. And, you know, that's why I think sometimes people get confused when I play the Bee Gees, when I'm being booked as radio slave, maybe. And all those sort of things can happen. But
maybe they would be more confused if you would be booked as Quiet Village and then you play the Bee Gees. But who knows?
Yeah.
Maybe some really unknown edit.
Yeah, Matt, you mentioned the DJ Hell remix.
Yeah.
That one is amazing, 28 minutes long. What was the idea behind it?
With that remix, I mean, I really loved the original, but I planned to actually make an hour-long mix, and got to like 28 minutes, and this was again with Tom, and Tom couldn't actually make it. He didn't have the time to produce any more parts, but the idea was to almost have, it was going back to these kind of disco edits or remixes like by Walter Gibbons, where they're almost like suites. So, you know, you start in one direction, and kind of with that remix, it kind of goes from being very dark into the light, and that was the idea. So, yeah, I wanted to try and get the most out of that song, so that's why it's so long.
Okay, thank you.
But thank you.
When you're doing a remix, which parts do you start, or how's your approach to like? Do you want to do the original, like at least original as most as it could, or?
Yeah, I mean, when I'm doing a remix, I mean, obviously you receive the parts, I go through them all, and that's the most important part, is to really sort of listen to how the song was made, and to try and get the best out of it. If there are drums or if there are percussion parts, then I tend to sample those rather than use my own kit, which then gives you, even if you may end up using only a tiny bit of the original music, it kind of gives it a flavour of the original. And I really believe that it's really great to have, or to build your own kits. And so this is a great way by sampling, you know, the music that you're remixing as well. So, yeah. And then from there, laying it out and seeing what works and what doesn't. Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have another question. If
Of
you've ever
course.
gotten stuck making something, and how you've gotten past it, or been in a period where you didn't feel like you had something to make.
Well, I mean, I think over the last few years, I've made less and less music, but that's maybe from just travelling. But there have been occasions, especially with remixes. I mean, this is why I try and avoid, and I've kind of stopped remixing anything that's like minimal house or techno, because there's nothing to it in the first place. So it's very difficult to do a remix of a track that's only got like 6 parts, and it kind of defeats the object as well. I mean, I would love to do more pop remixes and stuff like that, because it's a real pleasure, and it's amazing to go, you know, to have the chance to work with vocalists or to songs. So, yeah.
Okay, so one last question. In your career, if you would have to start all over again, which is the one thing where you said this was essential, and the one thing where you said I should have avoided this?
I don't know. I mean, maybe I should have started younger. I don't know. I mean, it seems to me that a lot of people these days are making music at a very early age, and I'm kind of. I mean, I was obsessed with, you know, the first wave of electro and hip hop. People like Grand Wizard Theodore. But, you know, buying a pair of turntables when I was 12 was kind of impossible. I think kids these days can pick up a laptop or computer or iPad, and so yeah, in that way, that would be one thing that I would have loved to be able to do. I guess, I don't know. I mean, again, it goes back to having just, I think, ideas and just trying to do what you can with what you have, and yeah, living out your dream, I guess, which is what I think when I approached the Radio Slave thing, I think that's what I think I had a very clear view of the direction I wanted to go with the whole pop thing, because I think I was 30 years old. I was really frustrated with a lot of the music that's being made. I was really unhappy with, you know, how commercial dance music was at that point. There's so many terrible remixes, I think. So yeah, I had a very clear vision.
And we are very happy that you shared this vision with us tonight and throughout all your music. Thanks a lot. Matt Edwards.
Thank you.